Hi, Cynthia. Thank you for joining today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I have read your book a while ago, and so I'm looking forward to catching up with you about it and just finding out about your caregiving journey and your self-care. So I really appreciate having this time with you today. When we start the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast episodes, we start them with words of encouragement and inspiration from the Happy Healthy Caregiver jar. So I wanted to get your thoughts on today's inspiration. We'll pull something out here. It says, you'll get a lot more compliments for working out than you will for sleeping in. What do you think about that? What's your exercise regime these days?
I totally agree. I think it's been 4 years now. 4 years ago, a bunch of my friends in the neighborhood, like 4 other women in the neighborhood, we hired a trainer to come 3 days a week. And before the pandemic, we worked out in the backyard. In my backyard, he'd pull up his van and take out all his weights and his exercise equipment. And so it was great. And we're all, in our 60s. And so, it was a great way to stay in shape. And well, my husband was alive back then too, and he would sit in the backyard with us, and the trainer would give him weights, and he would lift them, or we'd do boxing on Saturday, and he would put on boxing gloves.
Nice.
It was really a great way. Since the pandemic, we don't do it in my backyard anymore, but we still do it on Zoom, which, it's not as great, but
better than nothing. Yes.
Yeah.
Better than
Yeah.
nothing for sure. And I do think, back when I was collecting these, I think I would definitely prioritize exercise over sleeping in, although I've matured and evolved, and sometimes you just need a good night's sleep, and sleep is what your body requires. And so I think picking that more meant for me, especially when I was working outside the home, and now with the pandemic, we've been working virtually as well, is that I would get up and get early to the gym, and might have sacrificed the sleep and sat in traffic if I didn't get up. And so that was kind of, I never regretted it. I never regretted getting up and working out. It always made me feel better and start my day off on a good note. So thank you for that. So I've read the book, but a lot of people have not met you, I'm sure. And so just wanted to kind of get a recap of your caregiving journey and, how that started for you and where you are now.
Sure. So the book covers my journey with my husband, who I met in college, and we were like college sweethearts, and we had this great life. He was an attorney. I worked as an administrator for the school district, and at age 47, he had a heart attack, and he didn't get enough oxygen to his brain, so he had an anoxic brain injury, and it was very severe. He was left pretty severely disabled. Like he needed 24-hour care. There had to be somebody with him. So the thing about it was he couldn't really, his speech was really impaired, but he understood everything that was said to him. So part of what I wrote in the book was this whole question of, is he there? Is he not there? And then, how do you pick up life after that? Because the medical community, I don't know if you're familiar with brain injuries, but anoxic brain injury is kind of like at the bottom of the list. Like, I can't tell you how many doctors have just said, gee, I'm so sorry, and not really offering any encouragement or help. Or, I even had one neurologist say, why bother with rehabilitation? He's never going to recover. That's just the way it's going to be. So I was lost, as you cross into this world of disability and caregiving, and there's no guide, and there's nobody to tell you, try this, try that. So it was just a whole process of trying one thing, trying another, getting doors, slammed in your face. And and then wondering, well, what do families do when you're faced with this, when you're faced with kind of this catastrophic injury and there isn't like a support system out there, there's not a medical system to kind of help you. How do you go on with your life? Um, so it's not all like a sad sack story in the book. It's really about then how, as a person, do you regain your sense of self and how are you going to live? Because we had this very nice life before his injury. You know, we did backpacking in the Sierras and we did a lot of
Mm.
vacationing. And so it was like, how do I recapture some of that life and find happiness, not just for him, but for me as a caregiver? And what is out there for me as a caregiver? It's such a lonely, lonely experience
It
when you're,
is. Yes. How, thank you for sharing that. And how awful to hear some of those things that you've had to hear. And then for your life to just change on a dime, like you said, you know, just when you kind of think you have all the, everything kind of in a groove, with your family, and then it's just pulled out from under you. So I, thank you for sharing that. And then to have that injury, and you're learning everything about the injury. And to your question, like I know you were saying, you know, is he there or not? And I remember reading in your book a quote that you said, I felt like a widow, but he wasn't dead, which I thought
yeah.
was a good way to say it.
Yeah, yeah, it was. Although now I am a widow because, you know, sadly my husband passed away 2 years ago, a few months before the
Mm.
book publication date. Um, and you know, the whole time that I was caregiving, it's so hard. I think every caregiver will relate to this experience. It's so exasperating at times that you just think, is this ever going to end? And is this going to end? And during those moments, I used to always think, well, at least he's here. You know, having him in this condition is better than not having him at all. And 2 years into widowhood, I still believe that. Like I would take those moments back
Mm.
just to have his presence, because just because someone's disabled doesn't mean that they're not there.
No. And what were the things that happened that you knew you know, he was still there, frankly?
You know, there would be times where I'm very good friends with my neighbors across the street, and we would be having dinner. And like I said, he really had trouble initiating speech. He would not enter into a conversation on his own. He'd answer a question if you asked him, and we would be having dinner and talking about something, some topic or something, and then he would just, you know, enter in the conversation, say, well, I think blah, blah, blah. And we would all stop and go, whoa, he was
Yeah,
following the whole time and he was listening.
that's perfect. That's perfect. Well, and I know, how long ago did the brain injury and the heart attack, the cardiac arrest happen for you? What
It
year
was
was?
in 2003.
Mm.
So the whole journey was 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So how did you cope with that for 15? You know, what would you tell women or moms that are in your situation that, have somebody with a traumatic brain injury and kind of in your state, like did you have a mantra or some kind of thing that you would think about or say to yourself, or how did you go through that, get through, how do you think you got through the 15 years?
Well, a lot of times when I look back, I think when you're in it, you don't even know how bad it is. Do you know what I mean? It's like
Hmm.
I was caregiving, I was working full time at a very stressful job, and I retired 2 years ago. And once I retired, I realized, my God, how did I do that? You know what I mean? Because you just put these blinders on and you go. I think what really helped me, though, was finding support from other people. So, like I said, my neighbors across the street are a great source of support. I have a big extended family that, you know, was always there for me. Um, and I think really finding those sources of support. Like I joined an impromptu brain injury group of all of spouses of women whose husbands were brain injured. And even though I couldn't attend the meetings a lot, there was constant email back and forth. So whenever I felt like this is terrible, I can't handle it, that group was there for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the other thing too, and this was a really hard lesson to learn, is the whole self-care of traveling and doing things on my own just to get that experience of life without disability. And I think it was really hard. It took me a few years to even do that. But by the end, I had a great caregiver that I felt really, really comfortable leaving my husband with, and I would travel, with friends or on my own. And I think it's so hard as a caregiver to give yourself permission to do that, because you feel like you're the only person that can do this. You're filled with guilt for leaving, the person that you're caring for. And so I think my one message to caregivers is do it, just forget the guilt and just try to get away and experience what life is like without caregiving, because then you come back and you're refreshed and you can handle it again.
You can handle it, and then you until the next break. And especially I don't know what was your impetus in order to say, okay, I need to try this. And maybe it was having the right professional caregiver in place and the support system, which is definitely important to feel like you're confident that you can leave and have confidence in somebody. But when you're looking at something like 15, you didn't know it was going to be 15 years. You just knew this was not a short stint. This is not somebody getting over, a knee surgery or hip surgery where they're going to be back on their feet at some point. Like, this is life. And so you've got to kind of, keep your energy and your systems up. And like you said, I appreciate you coming back and saying, you've got this, you can keep doing it, keep showing up with a good attitude. You mentioned the support group. How did you find that? Did someone connect you with it? Did you search for it? How do people find those resources?
I went to a brain injury conference in Los Angeles. It was one I think for California. It was a brain injury conference, because back then, at the very beginning, I would go to like every conference, even the ones that were for professionals. I went just for my own learning, to know about what's out there, what research is being done. And I met women through this brain injury conference. And then we're still in touch, even though some of us are widowed now. And last year I spoke at a conference for the Well Spouse Association. I want to put out a plug for them. It's an organization in New Jersey that, they had a West Coast conference last year in Las Vegas that I spoke at, but I have never felt so welcomed in a group. And so, the feeling of I'm not alone in this, that everybody in the room had gone through a similar journey or was going through a similar journey. And they were such a welcoming group. So I would say, find those resources. There's tons of stuff on the web. There's tons of associations, and just join. At the very beginning, there was a place called the LA Caregiver Resource Center. And I think it was really for adults that were caring for their parents. But, I contacted them anyway, because I was like, caregiving. I just like scoured whatever resources were out there, and they had this program, a respite program, where they gave you a grant, for your self-care. And I didn't think anything of it. I mean, I signed up for all their materials and stuff, and they put me on this list. And like 2 years later, they called me and they said, "You're at the top of the list. You get this grant." And it was like, $2,000 or $3,000. I mean,
Nice.
it was a lot of money, and I was floored. And I think that was when I thought, oh my God, I really should care for myself. Like, someone's giving me money just for me, like not to pay for, a caregiver, but for me to do something. So that was kind of a revelation too, that there are organizations out there that are really, you
Yeah.
know,
And they make it, they will help remove that one barrier, where it could be a financial barrier either to pay for care or to go someplace, and whatever you can do to make it easy for someone to take that break, I think is important. You got your doctorate in social welfare. Did it help prepare you for to be a family caregiver, or did your
well, it didn't. My doctorate was really more in the research and statistics realm. I had such high expectations for social workers that I can't tell you how many social workers I encountered that were just clueless. And I thought, I remember when it happened, when he had his heart attack, we were in Portland, we were vacationing, and we went to the ICU unit there, and I was in total shock. I had no idea what to do. He was in a coma, and there was a social worker, and I thought, oh my God, a social worker. I love social workers. She's going to help me, and I she really didn't have anything to offer. I was just like, I have no idea what to do. I've just gone through this trauma. I don't know what to do. And all she did was she gave me a list of hotels,
mm,
that I could move to. And I was thinking, is that it? Like, that's all they do? Anyway, no. So it didn't help.
no, I do think there's a that would be one thing I'd love to see changed, is that the caregivers are in that hospital situations, or they're with doctors, and just somehow fast tracking them to the resources and um the things that would help them. Like you said, it's like, I think a lot of times they think about the care recipient, and they'll shit all over you to tell you what you need to do to care for your person. But that kind of stuff comes more naturally, I think, for in some ways for a caregiver, or that's the obvious thing. But nobody's really talking about, well, how do you maintain this, and integrate self-care and find connection to those support resources. So I think all of that is important. And I can't believe I remember that now, you were out of town when that happened. And so what another layer of crazy, you didn't have all your neighbors and your
Right.
local support system there, your doctors and things. And so um, it's, it just goes, it can happen in an instant. It can happen in an instant. You continued to work while you were caring for your husband. And I remember you saying, and I resonated with this too, that when I was caring for my mom, is that it was a kind of a source of sanity for you, right? It gives you a little bit of like, okay, this is me. I can throw whatever you can at me at work, and I know how to do that, or I can figure out how more easily how to do that.
Yeah, I think that's really important too, is it maintaining your own sense of identity, that you're not the one that's brain injured and you're not the one that's disabled. So how do you find that sense of self again? And so for a while, work was that kind of balm for me, because it was like when I went to work, it didn't matter that my husband was in the hospital or that he's with a caregiver. I had other things to think about, and it didn't consume my entire world until the end where it got too stressful, and I was thinking, why am I doing this? So when I turned 60, I retired.
Yeah. So what is it like, life after caregiving? I mean, some people like, what's it been like for you in the past 2 years? And
I thought I would feel this sense of relief, but it's more grief than relief. So it's been really hard. The first year was really, really hard, because we'd been together since our teenage
yeah,
years, and I'd never really lived alone. I mean, we always had each other, and then we had the kids, and then, after that, there was all this caregiving. So there was always somebody in the house. So it was really hard to get used to being in the house by myself, and it felt unnatural, that because it was like our house, not my house. So that first year, it was hard, and I did a lot of traveling. Um, I went to Europe. I went to Russia. I just made myself really busy. And then the second year, I've kind of settled into the house, and it feels really good. And I realize how quickly, like, when it happened and you cross into this world of disability, and everything changes, your whole perspective changes, and all you could see are the things that you can no longer do or that are closed off to you. And now that that's gone, I think I have a greater appreciation of just normal everyday things. Like, I could just walk out the door and go for a walk. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to arrange for a caregiver first, or or bring him with me and think, do I bring the walker, do I bring the wheelchair, that sort of thing. And it just makes me appreciate that so much more. Or walking into a restaurant, or when I was traveling, I would see these places and think, I could never bring my husband here because there's cobblestone streets, the pavement's uneven. I can't bring him in there. Or I still have this ingrained in my mind that whenever I go somewhere, I look for handicap restrooms, because I always had to, help him in the bathroom. And I'd always think, oh, I could have brought Perry here because
Yeah.
they have this handicap bathroom. So it gives you a very different perspective on life when it's over, and you realize I'm just so much more aware of people with disabilities and how hard they have to work. Like, one of our friends, my neighbor's son, said, I didn't realize, or just realized how hard Perry had to work just to stay in it with us. Like, his brain was probably working twice as
Mm-hmm.
hard just to understand what we were talking about and stay in the conversation. So I
Well, and
just,
what a gift you're giving to this neighbor to open up his eyes to, being with somebody that's physically disabled. So, you're exposing it to the other people around you, which is really a neat gift too. What what if so are you still writing?
I am still writing. I'm writing a book about my family history of immigration into the United States. Both my parents immigrated here from China
Mm.
in the 1940s. And I never sat down and wrote our family history. Like, how did they get in this country? There was this Chinese Exclusion Act that, excluded all Chinese. So they had to, who was it that came? Anyway, so I've been doing a lot of that research. I've done a couple of trips to China and found first cousins there that, my family has lost touch with.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
What a neat adventure for you, in a way that you can travel and you can learn about your culture and your family history, and truly like another story of perseverance. You've got your memoir of perseverance, and then it was in your DNA, I think, Cynthia, so with your folks.
I hadn't thought
So
about it that way. Yeah.
yeah, I love reading stories about perseverance. What are you hoping that so here's your book again so people can see. It's wherever you are, a memoir of love, marriage, and brain injury. What are you hoping that people take away from this, from reading your memoir?
I hope they take away the feeling that they're not alone in this. And what I was looking for at the time when this happened to me was, what happened to the families? What happened to the spouses? How do they cope? Because there's a lot, there's that whole medical shelf that publishers talk about of, illness, disability, sickness kind of memoirs, but they're all told from the perspective of the person that's ill or disabled.
Mm,
You know, um, there weren't any from the perspective of the caregiver and how they cope, and that's really what I was searching for when it happened to me. It's like, okay, I read about this, a husband that has this aneurysm or whatever, but what about the wife? Like, what does she do? Like, what does her everyday look like?
mhm.
And who does she turn to? So, so that's what I'm hoping people will get, is like, this is what it's like from the caregiver point of view.
I like it. I like it. And you said your husband passed before the book was published, but what did he know about it? What did he think about it? What did your sons think about it?
My sons are incredibly supportive. they're great. They were really proud. I don't know if he knew or not. I mean, I showed him the galleys, and he was really happy about it. I don't think I ever gave him parts of it to read because I
Mhm.
wasn't sure how much he could retain. His short-term memory was like
Mm.
2 or 3 minutes, and then
Wow.
yeah. So yeah, it was really hard during the book publication process because I was grieving and still having to do book promotions, and so it was hard to be kind of upbeat when I felt like
Yeah. Life
you
doesn't,
know
you wish you could just kind of hit the pause button and just give yourself time and to soak all of that in. 3 minutes is a this like, did he repeat himself all the time? And how did you cope with that if he with the short-term memory loss?
Well, I just treated him like he would not remember where he was,
Mm.
um, or what had happened, and so it was always kind of reminding him, today's Tuesday. But then, after a while, like after I retired, I thought, what does it matter what day of the week
Yeah,
it
it's
is,
another
right?
day.
And for
Yeah.
him, it's like, what did it matter what day it was? He had a pretty busy schedule. I found this great program at Santa Monica College for acquired brain injuries. And so he went there 3 days a week, and he had speech classes there and computer classes there. So he was, really busy.
Good.
Uh,
Hmm.
yeah.
And that was a win for him, but also a win for you to give you time to write and work on your things. And so I think that's important. I do. I think that's really important. We So I have a book as well that I'm not sure if you're familiar with. It's the Just for You Daily Self-Care Journal. And I wrote it with caregivers in mind, but it's not for caregivers specifically. It's really for anybody who's looking to just be more intentional about their self-care. And then the cool thing afterwards is that when you fill out the writing prompts and so forth, that it almost is like a mini memoir of you in a way. But it could be a sentence or a paragraph. So I just picked out a few pages to get your thoughts on some of the self-care prompts. Um, so this one says, "What is one of your favorite quotes? Do you have a favorite quote or a favorite saying of some sort?"
You know what? I am terrible at remembering quotes. My neighbor across the street is great. He always comes up with these great quotes that he remembers. And when
That's like
somebody
me
asks,
with jokes. I'm bad with
"Ah,"
jokes.
I'm terrible with jokes too. I can't ever.
All right.
I
Well, how
laugh
about
at
this
them, but I
one?
can't remember.
We'll go with the opposite page. Who can you count on to make you laugh?
What used to be my husband, he was always a really big jokester.
Did he
Uh,
maintain his sense of humor?
he
Yeah.
did, and that's what was so endearing about him, is that he always had this smile and ready laugh. He was really in, in good humor a lot of the time.
That's yeah, another reason to be grateful. Um, how did you cope, or how do you cope? Did you or do you cope with a difficult day?
Well, I go back to what we talked about at the very beginning about sleeping. I think you have to make sure that you get enough sleep. Um, yeah, those difficult days, it's like I can't wait until I can just go to bed and, close my eyes and forget it all.
How much do you require? Do you have like a amount of time that you're like, okay, I can function on this, function well, not just function, but function well on this?
I keep hoping that as I age, I need less sleep, but I'm not finding that. So I need like 8 hours of sleep.
I
And
like it.
uh, yeah, and really, well, during caregiving too, I didn't get that much sleep because I get up early and go to work.
Mm.
And my husband had, every now and then he'd have these really restless nights where, there was something going on in his mind and he wouldn't sleep. And so that was really difficult. So I always felt slightly sleep deprived
Mm.
when I was working in caregiving. And so since then, anyway, I'm thinking about what we talked about at the very beginning about working out versus sleeping in. I think during the pandemic, I think we should give ourselves permission to sleep more, because
Mhm.
I think there's so many people that are sleep deprived. I know I was, right?
Yeah,
And so,
I for sure was. And I have enjoyed, there have been some silver linings in the pandemic, and I have enjoyed not setting an alarm and just waiting for my body to wake up naturally. I don't have the commute that I have to worry about anymore currently. So um, that's been really refreshing. And I've also found like I used to be a morning shower person after workout. And now I sometimes, we exercise in the evening. We've been playing pickleball. I'll shower in the evening and sleep. I don't know. It's kind of, I feel like a little bit of life has been like in a snow globe, but it has not all been bad. There's been some good in that as well. So I'm enjoying that part of it.
I think just the ability to slow down.
Yeah. And just
Yeah.
permission to be a little bit slower. Okay. Here's a forward thinking last question. It says, describe what you want to be true in your life at this time next year. So next summer, what are you hoping to be true?
Well, I hope that, I don't want to get political here, but I hope that our country will be restored. But personally, I hope that I will continue to just be grateful for just all these little things that felt so close to me, those 15 years that I was doing caregiving. And I hope that I never lose that sense of appreciation, that I never take these things for granted.
I love that. I don't think I think it's with you. You're stuck with it. So it's a good thing to be. Is there anything that you would like to add? Any parting words of wisdom? And then also please share how people can connect with you if they'd like to learn more about you and what you're doing.
Yeah, I guess my one piece of advice or wisdom is, take care of yourself. I think it's such a trite thing, how people always say, if you're in a plane, you're supposed to put on a mask
Yeah.
on yourself first. And I used to always roll my eyes like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's so true, because I think if you're not feeling good, or if you're out of patience, then you're not going to be a good caregiver. And then
Hmm.
the second thing is, don't feel guilty. I think there's so much guilt when you're a caregiver, that you're the only person that can do this and nobody else can do what you do. And, you know, don't put that pressure on yourself.
It's good
Yeah.
advice.
So I have a blog. It's cynthialimwriting.com. Um, I haven't been updating so much during the pandemic, just because I just feel like there's nothing to say. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
you have to feel it. You got to kind of be in the mood to write. And yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I will link to that on the show notes for sure, so that people can connect with you there. And I have just enjoyed this time with you. I appreciate your vulnerability and your willing to share. I am grateful for talking to you, because I think often I've had guests on the show who are caring for aging parents, but the spouse and the marriage relationship is so unique and different. And so I'm grateful that you've put some spotlight on that, and that people have a place to turn and just, if they've gone through something similar, we're just to understand what that's like and how you cope through it for a very long time. So, and my wish for you is that, yeah, you just continue to travel and continue to kind of discover who Cynthia is. So that sounds like exciting stuff. Spend time with your kids and enjoy that. So, and just to cope through this pandemic however we can. So thank you, Cynthia, for coming on today on the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast. I appreciate it.
Right. Thank you so much for having me.